All right, hey people, today is May 25th, 2024. I'm Chris Lucas. This is my show, The Protestant View. Today, I'm basically doing a video just to see how quickly we can exegete Daniel 8. And if someone's unfamiliar with it, you might have to read through it a couple of times. This video is basically for someone who's read the chapter a couple of times recently. And I'm just going to kind of speed through it, but I will read through it one time. And basically, what I want to do is try to see if we can exegete this in under 15 minutes. So here we go. So I'm going to take myself out of the screen and just go completely full screen. Okay. In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, subsequent to the one that had appeared to me earlier. And in the vision, I saw myself in the Cadadal, excuse my reading, of Susa in the province of Elam. I saw in a vision that I was beside the Ulai Canal. Then I lifted up my eyes and I saw a ram with two horns standing beside the canal. The horns were long, but one was longer than the other, and the longer one grew up later. And I saw the ram charging towards the west and towards the north and the south. No animal could stand against him, and there was no deliverance from his power. He did as he pleased and became great. As I was contemplating all of this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between his eyes came out of the west, crossing the surface of the entire earth without touching the ground. He came towards the two-horned ram I had seen standing beside the canal and rushed at him with furious power. I saw him approach the ram in a rage against him, and he struck the ram and shattered his two horns. The ram was powerless to stand against him, and the goat threw him to the ground and trampled him, and no one could deliver the ram from his power. Thus the goat became very great, but at the height of his power, his large horn was broken off, and four prominent horns came up in its place, pointing towards the four winds of heaven. And from one of these horns, a little horn emerged and grew extensively towards the south, towards the east, and towards the beautiful land. It grew as high as the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the earth and trampled them. It magnified itself even to the prince of the host. It removed the daily sacrifice and overthrew the place of a sanctuary. And in the rebellion, the host and the daily sacrifice were given over to the horn, and it flung the truth to the ground and prospered in whatever it did. So we're almost done. And I heard a holy one speaking, and another one said to him, "How long until the fulfillment of the vision of the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary and the host to be trampled?" And he said to me, "It will take 2,300 evening mornings, then the sanctuary will be properly restored." So now we're going to read the rest of this text to see if we got any clues to what any of what we just read meant. So it says, while I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there stood before me one having an appearance of a man. And I heard the voice of a man calling from between the banks of Ulai, "Gabriel, explain the vision to this man." So he's going to explain what Daniel just saw. As he came near to where I stood, I was terrified and fell face down. "Son of man," he said to me, "understand that the vision concerns the time of the end." I'm not sure how good of a translation that is, but anyway. While he was speaking with me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face on the ground. Then he touched me, helped me to my feet, and said, "Behold, I will make known to you what will happen in the later time of wrath, because it concerns an appointed time of the end." The two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat represents the king of Greece. So, okay. So, what we should do is we're going to write down that we know that let me kind of do this. Ram equals Media Persia, right? And then you know the goat equals Greece. So got that simple part down so far, right? So the two-horn ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. So we know that these horns are, one's going to be Media, one's going to be Persia. So that's why it's got two horns. The shaggy goat represents the king of Greece, and the large horn between his eyes is the first king. The four horns that replace the broken one represent four kingdoms that will rise from that nation, but will not have the same power. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say large horn, equals first king. And then we got the four horns that come out of it. Oops. I don't know why this pen stopped working on me. So we got these four horns. Somehow I got it off track now. Equals four kingdoms that came out of this, right? I think that's pretty plain. Oops, fix this. First king. There we go. So that looks pretty easy, plain, simple, I would say. Represents so the four horns that replace the broken one represent four kingdoms that will come from that nation, but will not have the same power. So to me, this text is pretty clear that these horns are replacing this, right? Because it says the four horns that replace the broken one represent the four kingdoms that will rise from that nation. So obviously they're coming from the same nation. So this is going to be that same nation being broken into four parts, but will not have the same power, probably because they're not ruled by that same king and didn't come from any of his siblings. Now, in the later part of their reign, when the rebellion has reached its full measure, an insolent king skilled in intrigue will come to the throne. His power will be great, but it will not be his own. He will cause terrible destruction and succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy the mighty men along with the holy people. So we know the holy people is probably referring to the Jews, right? Because this is an Old Testament book of Daniel. Through his craft and by his hand, he will cause deceit to prosper, and in his own mind, he will make himself great. In a time of peace, he will destroy many, and he will even stand against the prince of princes. Yet he will be broken off, but not by human hands. The vision of the evenings and mornings that has been spoken is true. Okay, so what do we got to go on? So we got this. This guy's going to eventually. So in a time of peace, he will destroy many. So that means that they won't be in war. I'm imagining, right? Or at least there was like peace between him and this holy people. And he will even stand against the prince of princes. Yet he will be broken off, but not by human hands. Well, we know when that first horn gets broken, that sounds like he died. So I'm imagining that this means he's going to die, but not by human hands. So it's not going to be dying in war. No one's going to kill him. He's going to die by some other means. So the easiest way I would say to go about this is, when did let's see here. Oops, I don't want this up on the screen. We're going to go to Copilot, and me personally, I just go right to the AI. So we know. So now let me just ask the AI here. I'll do it like this. When did Media Persia? Oops. Hold on. Let me stop this. No, I didn't want to ask it like that. When was Media Persia conquered by Greece? So I'm just doing this so I can quickly get answers. Yes, we can go do a bunch of research on YouTube, and go through search engines and books, but so it says Media Persia was conquered by Greece during the Greco-Persian Wars, which spanned from 499 to 499 to 449 BC. The most significant battles that led the Greeks to overcoming the Persian forces were the Battle of Marathon and oops, gosh, I hate this, man. Sorry, my mouse is so sensitive. The most significant battles that led to the Greeks overcoming Persian forces were the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC. Oh man, this is not. Well, I guess the AI is not giving me these answers easy. Was there any sort of Greek king? I hate this, man. Why is it doing this to me today? Because we know history. Let me see here. How would you best ask this question then? Because I thought this was going to be a little bit simpler than this. Well, okay, look, we know history. Okay, we know Alexander the Great was the king of Greece and conquered Media Persia. So we're going to do it like this. We know Alexander the Great was the king of Greece at some point, correct? And if so, didn't he conquer Media Persia? And if so, what year was that? A little frustrating because I know I'm going to have people arguing with dumb arguments, and I just want to get right to the chase of this.
Yes, Alexander the Great was indeed the king of Macedonia, which was a powerful state in ancient Greece. He embarked on an ambitious campaign to conquer the Persian Empire, which included Media Persia. The conquest began in 334 BC when Alexander crossed into Asia Minor and initiated a series of military campaigns against the Achaemenid Persian Empire. These campaigns continued for about 10 years, culminating in the decisive defeat of the Persian king Darius III and the fall of the Persian Empire.
Would this be considered the true fall of the Media Persian Empire and not some earlier date?
The true fall of the Media Persian Empire is generally considered to be the defeat of the Persian armies by Alexander the Great. This event marked the end of the Achaemenid Empire and is often dated to 333 BC, when Alexander's forces defeated the Persians in Macedonia. However, the process of the empire's decline began earlier when Cyrus the Great overthrew the Median king around 550 BC and founded the Achaemenid Empire, effectively ending Median power and initiating Persian dominance. So, while the earlier date marks the beginning of the end for Median rule, the conquest by Alexander the Great is typically recognized as the definitive end of the Media Persian Empire.
Okay, because so just like in the prophecy, it talks about one horn is longer than the other and all that stuff. So we know that the Persian Empire was stronger than the Median Empire because the Persian Empire conquered the Median Empire. So, and what happened after Alexander the Great died? Because it says the large horn's going to be broken, right?
After Alexander the Great's death in 323 BC, his vast empire, which stretched from Greece to the Punjab and from Egypt to Samarkand, faced an immediate crisis. The empire did not have a clear successor, and Alexander's generals, known as the Diadochi, began to vie for power. This led to a series of conflicts known as the Wars of the Diadochi or the Successor Wars. Here's a brief overview of the events that followed. Immediate aftermath. Within hours of Alexander's death, unrest and power struggles erupted in Babylon among Macedonian soldiers and generals. Athenian revolt. News of his death reached Athens, sparking a revolt against Macedonian rule as Athens led a coalition of anti-Macedonian city-states. Rebellions. Rebellions occurred in various regions, including Thrace, Cappadocia, and Bactria Sogdia, as local leaders sought independence from Macedonian control. Division of the empire. Alexander's empire was divided among his generals, with regions like Egypt going to Ptolemy and other territories being claimed by different successors. Wars of the Successors. The empire fell into a prolonged period of wars and conflicts among the Diadochi, which lasted for several decades and led to the eventual disintegration of the unified empire into separate Hellenistic kingdoms. The period following Alexander's death was marked by turmoil and the struggle for control over the territories he had conquered, shaping the political landscape of the ancient world for years to come. The legacy of Alexander's conquests continued to influence the cultures and histories of the regions within his former empire.
And what do historians say about his empire? Was it divided up into 4 regions or 4 kingdoms?
Historians generally agree that after the death of Alexander the Great, his empire was divided among his generals, leading to the formation of several Hellenistic kingdoms. The most significant division occurred after the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC, where the empire was divided into 4 major regions, each ruled by one of Alexander's successors. Here are the 4 kingdoms that emerged. Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, ruled by Ptolemy Isoter, one of Alexander's most trusted generals. Seleucid Empire, governed by Seleucus I Nicator, it included much of the former Achaemenid Persian Empire and parts of Asia Minor. Kingdom of Macedon, controlled by Cassander, it encompassed Macedonia and parts of Greece. Kingdom of Lysimachus, included Thrace and parts of Asia Minor ruled by Lysimachus. These kingdoms were the result of the power struggles and wars among the Diadochi, Alexander's successors, and marked the beginning of the Hellenistic period, which saw the spread of Greek culture across the Near East and Mediterranean. The division into these 4 kingdoms laid the foundation for the political landscape of the ancient world for centuries to come.
And about how long did these 4 Hellenistic kingdoms last for?
The 4 Hellenistic kingdoms that emerged after the death of Alexander the Great lasted for different lengths of time, but the Hellenistic period as a whole is generally considered to have lasted from 323 BC, the year of Alexander's death, until 30 BC, the death of Cleopatra VII and the Roman conquest of Ptolemaic Egypt. This period marks the end of the last major Hellenistic kingdom and the rise of Roman dominion. Here's a brief timeline of the duration of these kingdoms. Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt lasted until 30 BC when Cleopatra VII died and Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. Seleucid Empire experienced fragmentation over time and eventually fell to the Roman Republic and Parthian Empire by 63 BC. Kingdom of Macedon faced multiple conflicts and was eventually conquered by Rome in 168 BC. Kingdom of Lysimachus. Thrace Lysimachus was killed in 281 BC, and his territory was contested among other successors, with parts eventually falling under Seleucid and Ptolemaic control. The Hellenistic kingdoms were characterized by their blend of Greek and local cultures, and their rulers often adopted the title of king in emulation of Alexander. Despite their eventual decline, the Hellenistic period was a time of cultural and scientific flourishing that had a lasting impact on the Mediterranean.
Okay, so what I'm seeing here is that it looks like these kingdoms got started around three, well, Okay, now if I'm going to look at this prophecy, we're going to go back here. We're going to see that Alexander the Great conquered. Alexander the Great died in 323. He started conquering this territory. He conquered Media Persia about 333 BC. So I'm going to go back to my notes. I'm taking an extra second to write all this stuff down. So, what does it say about 333 BC according to this? And this might not be the best. They might be a year or so off on these dates. So we got Alexander conquering. I'll just put Alex conquers MP Media Persia, 323 death. And so we got, and what does it say? Oh man, I can't, using all these programs is like making me lose my cursor. I'm kind of running out of room too on my notes. So we're going to have, let's see here. So we pretty much got all these kingdoms divided into 4 by 301 BC. And then we see that they last from about 301 BC till 30 BC. So now we know that sometime between 301 and 330 BC, we got to see this little horn. So we're going to put 301 BC to 30 BC. So I would start to say that the latter end of their kingdom, I don't know all the particular details. Man, I wish I didn't have to use all these programs to show this stuff. But I know some people, they don't have that visual. They're not going to follow it, definitely. Was there any kind of king or ruler that came out of one of these 4 kingdoms that was particularly dominating for a time and maybe persecuted the Jews? Says yes, there was.
Yes, there was a ruler from one of the Hellenistic kingdoms who was particularly dominating and known for his persecution of the Jews, Antiochus IV Epiphanes. He was the Seleucid king of the Hellenistic Syrian kingdom and reigned from 175 to 164 BC. Antiochus IV is infamous for his harsh policies against Judaism, which included the prohibition of Jewish religious practices and the desecration of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. His attempts to enforce Hellenistic culture and suppress Jewish traditions led to the Maccabean Revolt, a significant uprising by the Jews against Seleucid rule. Antiochus's actions had a profound impact on Jewish history and are commemorated during the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, which celebrates the rededication of the Second Temple following the victory of the Maccabees over the Seleucid forces. His reign is often seen as a period of great trial for the Jewish people, and his legacy is remembered as one of oppression and religious persecution.
And how did Antiochus die?
Antiochus IV Epiphanes died in 164 BC. His death is attributed to an illness he contracted while he was in Tabi or Gabi, which is present-day Isfahan in Persis, Iran. The circumstances of his death marked the end of his controversial reign and the persecution of the Jewish people that led to the Maccabean Revolt. Antiochus's death was a significant turning point for the Seleucid Empire, which continued to face challenges and eventually succumbed to Roman and Parthian pressures.
Okay, so it sounds like we might have our guy here, and I don't know why this is so hard for people, because now we got this guy. We needed this. It looks like we got the right dates. Because now when I read this again, we're going to say, then I lifted up my eyes. I saw a ram with two horns standing beside the canal. The horns were long, but one was longer than the other. So that would be Persia conquering the Medes. And the longer one grew up later. So that is what happened. The Persian kingdom did conquer the Medes because it came up later. I saw the ram charging towards the west, towards the north, towards the south. No animal could stand against him. It was one of the most powerful kingdoms, so we know this looks pretty well fitting. As I was contemplating all this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between his eyes came out of the west, crossing the surface of the entire earth without touching the ground. He came towards the two-horned ram I had seen standing beside the canal and rushed at him with furious power. I saw him approach the ram in a rage, and he struck the ram, shattered its two horns. The ram was powerless to stand against him, and the goat threw him to the ground and trampled him, and no one could deliver the ram from his power. So that is what looks like it just happened from what we were reading. Thus, the goat became very great, and at the height of his power, his large horn was broken off. So, and this kingdom, it was at its power. They say Alexander the Great was depressed because he had nothing left to conquer, and he died shortly after he took over all this territory. His large horn was broken off. Four prominent horns came up in his place. It looks pretty well, so far that these this got divided up into four kingdoms, and from one of these horns, a little horn emerged and grew extensively. It grew extensively towards the south, towards the east, and towards the beautiful land. Well, we just read Antiochus Epiphanes. I don't know how you actually pronounce his name, but Antiochus, it looks like he did exactly that, right? As it grew up as high as the host of heaven, cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. Well, hosts of heaven would be the Jews because they are like the people of God. It did cast some of them to the ground. The stars would probably be the leaders of the Jews, and trampled them. It magnified itself even to the Prince of Hosts. Now, some of this wording you can go, well, Chris, I don't know if that should be interpreted this way. Let's just get in general to just even see if we're just in the ballpark, right? It magnified itself even to the Prince of the Hosts. So, see here. Did Antiochus Epiphanes ever do something that would be considered magnifying himself as high as the Jewish God?
Antiochus IV Epiphanes did take actions that were considered by the Jews to be an affront to their god. He is known for his attempts to Hellenize the Jews and impose the worship of the Greek pantheon, particularly Zeus. Antiochus took the epithet Epiphanes, which means God manifest, and some sources suggest he even claimed to be Zeus incarnate. One of the most egregious acts he committed was the desecration of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. In 168 BC, Antiochus invaded Jerusalem, captured the city, and then marched into the Jewish temple. There, he erected a statue of the Greek god Zeus and sacrificed a pig on the altar of incense. This act was seen as a direct challenge to the Jewish faith and their worship of Yahweh, and it sparked the Maccabean revolt as the Jews fought to remove the sacrilege from the temple and restore their religious practices. This period of persecution and the subsequent revolt are significant events in Jewish history and are commemorated during the festival of Hanukkah. Antiochus's actions are often interpreted as him magnifying himself above the God of Israel, leading to severe conflict and suffering for the Jewish people at that time.
Okay, so this looks pretty fitting so far. So it grew up as high. So from one of these horns, a little horn emerged. So he did come out of one of those four kingdoms and grew extensively towards the south, towards the east, and towards the beautiful land. One thing also is like in the Encyclopedia Britannica, it also says this was like one of the last, I guess, how would you best articulate this? Like one of the last powerful kings. Last bit of like when a kingdom's like doing really good. Gosh, my articulation of my vocabulary is kind of escaping me right now. But it's like this was like the last last hurrah, last great bit of oh man, if well, I don't know why my mind is so struggling for words right now. But it's sort of like the last great leader they had, and then everything just started. This whole kingdom just started totally decline. Like all the Hellenistic kingdoms just were on a decline after this. So this was like one of the last great moments for this kingdom. So anyway, it says it grew as high as the hosts of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the earth and trampled them. So we do see that it did persecute the Jews from 168 to 164 BC. It magnified itself even to the prince of the host, and it removed the daily sacrifice and overthrew the place of a sanctuary. So we see that recorded in history. We also see this recorded in the book of Maccabees. So in the book of Maccabees or in the works of Josephus, can you give me specific quotes that could back up the claim that Antiochus Epiphanes took away the daily sacrifice?
Certainly, both the Book of Maccabees and the works of Flavius Josephus provide accounts of Antiochus IV Epiphanes taking away the daily sacrifice. Here are specific quotes from these sources. From the Book of 1 Maccabees. On the 15th day of the month Kislev in the year 145, King Antiochus set up the abomination that causes desolation on the altar of God, and they built altars in all the surrounding towns of Judah. The 15th of Kislev was the day when the daily burnt offering was stopped and the abomination that causes desolation was set up. 1 Maccabees 1:54-59. From the works of Flavius Josephus. Now Antiochus was not satisfied either with his unexpected taking the city, or with its pillage, or with the great slaughter he had made there, but being overcome with his violent passions, he compelled the Jews to dissolve the laws of their country, and to keep their infants uncircumcised, and to sacrifice swine's flesh upon the altar, against which they all opposed themselves, and the most approved among them were put to death. The works of Flavius Josephus, War of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 1. These passages describe the actions of Antiochus Epiphanes in halting the daily sacrifices and desecrating the Jewish temple, which are central to the historical accounts of his reign and persecution of the Jewish people.
Okay, one thing I do want to point out is, oops, gosh, I wish this thing would not scroll. I don't know why I have such.
Of course, feel free to share your thoughts or.
Gosh, shut up. Okay, so right here it says, from the works of Flavius Josephus, it says, now Antiochus was not satisfied either with his unexpected taking of the city, or with its pillage, or with the great slaughter he had made there, but being overcome with his violent passions, he compelled the Jews to dissolve the laws of their country, and to keep their infants uncircumcised, and to sacrifice swine's flesh upon the altar, against which they all opposed themselves. And here's the key part, and the most approved among them were put to death. So that kind of reminds me when it says the most approved among them were put to death. It said, it grew as high as the hosts of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the earth and trampled them. See, I would say the stars are the most approved among the Jews. And it kind of fits into what Josephus is recording. So, I mean, to me, this looks like it fits pretty well. So, and in the rebellion, the host and the daily sacrifice were given over to the horn. This rebellion, I think this is the Jews going along with the Hellenization, because that's how you rebel. Because it sure isn't Antiochus rebelling against God, because he was already against God, so this was already going on. So this rebellion right here, this is referring to the Jews, and the host and the daily sacrifice were given over to the horn. Why was it given over to the horn? Because of the Jewish rebellion, because some of the Jews were going along with this Hellenization. So here, I'm going to ask the AI. Were the Jews, or some of the Jews, or most of the Jews, I don't know how many exactly, but was there a problem with them going along with this Hellenization prior to Antiochus persecuting them? So let's see.
Before the persecution by Antiochus IV Epiphanes, there was indeed a segment of Jewish society that had become increasingly familiar with and adaptive to Hellenism. The Seleucid rule in Palestine prior to Antiochus IV had been relatively respectful and protective of Jewish institutions, and many Jews had begun to adopt aspects of Greek culture and language. However, this Hellenization was not uniform across all Jewish communities. There were certainly traditionalists who resisted these influences and sought to maintain their distinct religious and cultural practices. The tension between the Hellenizing Jews and those adhering to traditional Judaism set the stage for the conflict that would erupt during Antiochus IV's reign. Antiochus IV's aggressive Hellenization policies, including the banning of Jewish practices and the desecration of the temple, exacerbated these tensions and ultimately led to the Maccabean Revolt. This revolt was not just against the Seleucid Empire, but also against the Hellenistic influence on Jewish life that some felt was eroding their identity. In summary, while some Jews had embraced Hellenistic ways to varying degrees, there was a significant resistance to Hellenization among others, which became a source of internal conflict within the Jewish community. This internal strife contributed to the conditions that led to the severe persecution under Antiochus IV and the subsequent rebellion.
Okay, so we do see that there was an issue with Jews going along with Hellenization. So to me, that looks like God, because of their rebellion, handing them over to someone like Antiochus, who was doing all these things that look pretty descriptive. So now I'm going to get to verse 13. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to him, how long until the fulfillment of the vision of the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary and the host to be trampled? And he said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings, mornings, then the sanctuary will be properly restored. Okay, so is there anything in the writings of Josephus or in the book of Maccabees that tells us when the sanctuary was restored, and about what year was that also?
Yes, both the writings of Josephus and the Book of Maccabees provide information on the restoration of the sanctuary. According to the Book of 1 Maccabees, the rededication of the temple took place on the 25th day of the month of Kislev in the year 148 of the Seleucid era, which corresponds to 164 BC. This event is celebrated in the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. Josephus also refers to the Maccabean revolt and the restoration of the temple, aligning with the accounts in the Book of Maccabees. However, specific dates in Josephus' works are more challenging to pinpoint due to variations in textual transmissions and interpretations. The restoration of the sanctuary was a significant event that marked the Jewish reclaiming of their religious practices and traditions after the period of persecution under Antiochus IV Epiphanes. The rededication symbolized the resilience and faith of the Jewish people in the face of Hellenistic influences and oppression.
Okay, so we have an ending to this, and then we were looking for. Okay, so it says on the 15th day of the month of Kislev in the year 145. So it's 145 of the Seleucid dating. So, okay, so 15th day of the month of Kislev, 145 Seleucid. We go down here where it just talked to us, 148. So that's, and it says the 25th 25th day of the month of Kislev. So just to kind of draw this up, it says what, the 15th of, so let me just kind of that way we're not. So the 15th, Kislev, 145 to the 25th, Kislev. And then we know these are Jewish years, or Jewish calendar. It's like Seleucids, Jews, Babylonians. They sort of all use a similar calendar, but this is recorded in the Book of Maccabees, so we know that it's just giving us the year and the Seleucid year. But we know this is Jewish months, right? So we can go on a Jewish calendar and we can figure out that, and without me showing all this and making this video too long, we know Kislev, it correlates to about the month of December, and it varies because the Jewish calendar is a lunar solar calendar, sometimes with 12, sometimes with 13 months if it's a leap year. These months are actually moons. So there's about 29.5 days in each moon cycle. So what this means is you're going to have one month with about 29 days in it, another with 30 in it, and it's real hard to know without real fine astronomical equipment exactly how this is dated, to like the very day, right? So, but what we can do is get a ballpark, right? And as long as we get a ballpark and we know that this fits in with everything, then we know that we probably definitely got the right prophecy, right? Or we got everything else right, because so far almost everything else matches up. So as long as we get a date that doesn't contradict anything, then we look like we're probably into the right spot. So the 25th day of the month of Kislev and the Seleucid year of 148 corresponds to 164 BC. So we know 145 would correspond to about 168. And the reason why I say 168, because people are like, well, that's a 4-year age difference. Well, you got to think on our solar calendar. When we say, we start a year right at January and it ends right at December. But on theirs, that Jewish month of Kislev could go partly into our next year, because it could start anywhere in December and it could end the first week of January or so, right? So if it can go about 10 days into January and start in December, that's why I'm saying 168 to 164, because it goes into 164, but it's like January of 164, like maybe a day or two. That's what, some say that's why they come up with this 164, the 25th of Kislev. Okay, just because I know that can be confusing to people. They see a 4-year a 4-year difference when you're doing our BC dates, and so just to kind of explain that to people. So anyway, we know Jewish year. Let's see here. I'll just do it this way. What's the maximum amount of days and the minimum amount of days in a 3-year cycle on a Jewish calendar? What if there was one? Well, here, we'll just do it this way.
The Jewish calendar is lunisolar, which means it is based on the cycles of both the moon and the sun. A typical Jewish year has either 12 or 13 months, with the addition of a leap month in certain years to align the lunar months with the solar year. The length of a Jewish year can vary due to this intercalation and other adjustments. In a 3-year cycle, including one leap year, the Jewish calendar can have the following minimum and maximum number of days. Minimum, 1 deficient year, 353 days, 1 regular year, 354 days, and 1 leap year, 383 days, totaling 1,090 days. Maximum, 1 complete year, 355 days, 1 regular year, 354 days, and 1 leap year, 385 days, totaling 1,094 days. These variations account for the different lengths of months and the intercalation of the leap month, Adar 2, which is added in the leap year. The Jewish calendar is designed to ensure that festivals and religious observances occur in their appropriate seasons, particularly the spring festival of Passover. The intercalation cycle is based on a 19-year Metonic cycle, with 7 leap years within that cycle.
Okay, so we're going to go with, let's see here, this complete year, one complete year, which they say can have 1,094 days. Now, you got to remember, this also said from Kislev 15 to Kislev 25. So let's add 10 more days to that. So we're going to have 1,000. So 1,104 days, because we got to add in also that 10-day difference. So we know there's a 10-day. So we got 1,104 days so far for that temple being desecrated, right? And we're just using one leap year. If we use 2 leap years, we go all the way up to 1,133 days. So if there was a second leap year in there, but we're still missing either 17 days to 46 or 47 days, right? So what do we do with this difference? And hold on, I forgot part of this. When it says to me it will take 2,300 evening mornings and the sanctuary will be properly restored. There are Jewish writings where they interpret these days as being 1,150 days. There was this guy named Saldia. I don't know how to pronounce his whole name, but they say he was like the first among the Geonim to formulate a comprehensive view of the Masonic predictions. So he's just this Jewish, I guess, this Jewish. I guess you would call him maybe a rabbinic scholar, right? And he's trying to come up with like different interpretations for the Book of Daniel. Now, he rejects the Messiah, but the one thing is, a lot of there's a few different Jews that were where it's written down that they were interpreting this 2,300 evening mornings to be 1,150 days. Okay, so this isn't like an odd thing I'm doing by saying no. This is actually half that time, right? And just to give you a clue about this, when we go and we read up to these verses, this is talking about the daily sacrifice. And it says, so the question is, how long will the fulfillment of the vision of the daily sacrifice, because it says it was taken away, because they said that it removed God's daily sacrifice. So what was God's daily sacrifice? So we're going to go to Exodus 29, and I'll just use the Berean Bible. I think it's decent. Oh, why won't it come up here though? Exodus. Well, why? I wonder why it did that to me. But that's really odd. Let's try this one. I did not want to get audio Bible. Man, I don't know why it's doing this to me. This is frustrating. I'll just use whatever is up on my screen right now. Well, can't get out of it. Okay, maybe I got to use another one then. Sorry about this. So I'll just go to New King James. So I just want a simple translation. So all I'm really looking for. So we're going to find the words. Why is it doing this? So now we're going to say evening So we need 39. So it says this, now this is what you shall all, so this is Exodus 29 verses 38. It says, now this is what you shall offer on the altar: 2 lambs of the first year, day by day, continuously. So this is your daily or your continual. In the Hebrew, you can translate that word continual or daily. 1 lamb you shall offer in the morning. The other lamb you shall offer at twilight, which is the evening. With 1 lamb, it shall be, well, I'm not going to read the rest of this, but this is where I'm getting what I'm saying from. So that's why I'm saying this isn't too crazy. So this is a little bit harder for people to figure out, but I do want to just go over this one part. And then we're also going to go to Numbers 28, so I can show you something else. I got to get a new mouse. Numbers 28. And we see the same thing here. And you shall say to them, so this Numbers 28, verse 3, and you shall say to them, this is the offering made by fire, which you shall offer to the Lord: 2 male lambs in their first year, without blemish, day by day, as a regular burnt offering. Oh, yeah, that's another word they can use for daily too. The regular, as a regular burnt offering. The 1 lamb you shall offer in the morning, the other lamb you shall offer in the evening. And I believe that, like, Ezra, let's see here, I think Ezra 3 also has this too. So we're going to look at Ezra 3 and see if it's got morning in here. Yep, here we go. Ezra 3. Though fear had come upon them because of the people of those countries, they set the altar on its bases, and they offered burnt offerings on it to the Lord, both the morning and the evening burnt offerings. They also kept the Feast of Tabernacles as it was written, and offered the daily burnt offerings in the number required by the ordinance for each day. So this is where I'm getting at. If you have 1 offering in the evening and 1 in the morning, now we can reduce this to 2,300 sacrifices. 1 done in the evening, 1 done in the morning. So that's how I'm getting this total, right? So just, and people want to argue with that, that's fine. I got everything else to match, so I don't know why anyone would have a big deal over this, right? Because this looks pretty reasonable. Daily sacrifice, we just read it, 2,300. We can say that's 2,300 sacrifices, so it's quite possible that means 1,150 days. So my main final point is, if we know that we still got this missing 47 days. Okay, so if we look on a Jewish calendar, let's see here. I'm just going to take the Hebrew calendar, take any random year, just so you guys can see a picture of this. So if we go all the way to Kislev, which is right here. So, oh, one thing I don't like is that they don't have the numbering. Oh, this is going to be messier if I don't have this numbering so you can see it. Because I don't like... Oh, here we go. Day. Show the Hebrew date. This is what messed me up the other day. So now we can see this Kislev, right? See 1st of Kislev. And then we can see the 30th of Kislev. So I guess this year, December 24th, their calendar almost lines right up to our calendar, because got the 30th of Kislev, which would be the last day of the Jewish month. And it's right here in December. But like I was saying, if sometimes that Kislev, it can be pushed all the way into January. But anyway, so we're going to go down to the 15th of Kislev, which is when they said that this thing started, right? I mean, when Antiochus set up the altar to Zeus. So if we just count backwards, 47 days. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. So we're going to have right around the 28th of Tishri. Okay, maybe the 27th, 28th of Tishri. One of these two dates. So where does this fall in? This is about October. Now, it could also be it could also fall in September. Okay. Or maybe the very first week of October. Because depending on this month, right, this Jewish calendar year happens to be a leap year, but let's say it was a normal year, it could have been Tishri could have started in September, and so the very end of Tishri could be October. Okay. Now one important point I'm going to find out is this is only because I know history, so you guys got to like study history a little bit. But like I said, I had everything else match, and so now when you're just starting to look up these minute details, when did Antiochus Epiphanes encounter a Roman envoy? Could you give me the month and the year that happened in?
Antiochus Epiphanes encountered the Roman envoy Gaius Popilius Laenas in Eleusis, a suburb of Alexandria, on June 22, 168 BC. During this encounter, Popilius Laenas presented Antiochus with an ultimatum from the Roman Senate, demanding that he evacuate Egypt and Cyprus immediately. This event is a well-documented and significant moment in the history of the Hellenistic period, showcasing the power and influence of Rome over the Hellenistic kingdoms.
Okay, so here's another really good detail we got here. So we know it was probably around December that Antiochus, right, um, goes and sets up that temple. Now we have this event that happens. Now the question is, can Antiochus get from this place, which is near Egypt or in Egypt, and says evacuate Egypt and Cyprus immediately? So can he get his army? Does he have enough time to move all these people all the way to Jerusalem, Palestine, by the time of Kislev 15? Actually, it's got to be a little bit earlier. Remember, I said we had to account for about 47 days possibly. Now, if it was a leap, if those, and within those 3 years, if it happens to be a leap year, we only have to account for 17. But let's say we have to account for about 47 days at least, 47 more days than what we have in that book of Maccabees. Could this army get all the way over there in that amount of time? So I know this is going to be a really rough estimate, but how long do you think it might take for Antiochus Epiphanes to move such an army all the way from Egypt and Cyprus all the way to Jerusalem?
The exact time it would have taken for Antiochus Epiphanes to move his army from Egypt and Cyprus to Jerusalem is not documented in historical sources. However, based on the distances and the typical speeds of ancient armies, we can make an educated guess. Ancient armies could march approximately 15 to 30 miles per day, depending on the terrain, the size of the army, and logistical support. The distance from the northern border of Egypt to Jerusalem is roughly 320 miles. Assuming an average pace, it might have taken Antiochus's army about 11 to 22 days to cover this distance. It's important to note that this is a very rough estimate. Factors such as the need to secure supply lines, the state of roads, weather conditions, and political circumstances could have significantly affected the actual time required for the journey. Antiochus's campaign against Egypt was interrupted by Roman intervention, and after he was forced to leave Egypt, he took Jerusalem by storm in 167 BC and enforced its Hellenization. This suggests that the movement of his army would have been swift following the Roman ultimatum, as he aimed to secure his control over the region.
And please keep in mind, I think he actually attacked in 168 BC. But like I said, these dates are a little hard to get exact because when this event happened, you got to remember it happened around the month of December. Well, the month of December can slide into the next year, right? Because a Jewish month can take up part of December and part of January, and depending on what historians looking at this, they might say 168 or 167 BC. So I think that's why the AI now is saying, "Oh, it took it by storm in 167," when earlier it was telling us 168. So I think that's kind of what's going on in case people are a little confused, right? But these are details you can look deeper in for yourself. What we're basically trying to say is, could Antiochus make it all the way from there, all the way to Jerusalem? Now, I'm surprised it said 11 to 22 days because in the past it told me a minimum of 40 days. So, so this is a lot quicker, right, than even what I said. So, what would 1 month be? July 22nd. I think I had estimated around August, right? So when we're looking at this Jewish calendar, we know Tishri starts in September. So as long as they could get there by September, oh, around 20, maybe the 22nd, give them 3 whole months to get there, we can see that they can easily get there by the 26th of Tishri, right? Because let's see here, what would the Jewish month be? I would say it would be more like Savan. So let's say it was like Savan 22, because I bet that's how they're even coming up with June 22nd. It's probably actually like Savan 22nd, just like Kislev 25, right? They would say, oh, that's December 25, but it's not really December 25. What it is it's someone trying to give your average lay person some clue, right? But we know the Jewish month of Kislev's not always going to be right in sync with December 25th, right? So when it says Kislev 25, we know, and they relate that to like us lesser learned people, and they go, oh, it's like December 25th. Okay, I think that's what they're doing when the AI told us June 22nd. It's more like Savan 22nd, right? In the period of between Savan 22nd, so how many months is there? Like there, we got Savan, we got Tammuz, we got Av. So we got Tammuz, Av, and then Elul. So I think that's plenty of time. That's at least a 3 month period of time. And then you got Tishri after that. So let's not count Savan since it was 22nd of Savan. And we'll say Tammuz, Av, AV, I think that's how you pronounce it, or Elul, ELUL. So there's 3 months. So we're giving that army about 3 months to get to Jerusalem, and we still get our 1,150 days that it would take for Antiochus to persecute him. I think Antiochus had attacked him on a Sabbath. So let's see here. Did Antiochus ever attack the Jews on a Sabbath prior to setting up the altar to Zeus? Now, I don't remember this exactly because it's been so long since I've went over these particular details. So it says, yes, Antiochus did attack the Jews on a Sabbath. According to history,
Yes, Antiochus IV Epiphanes did attack the Jews on a Sabbath. According to historical accounts, Antiochus's forces exploited the Jews' observance of the Sabbath, knowing they would not fight back on this day due to their religious laws. This strategy allowed his forces to carry out massacres and enforce his policies with less resistance. These attacks were part of his broader campaign to suppress Jewish religious practices and enforce Hellenization, which eventually led to the desecration of the temple and the erection of an altar to Zeus. The use of the Sabbath as a day of attack added to the severity of the persecution faced by the Jews under Antiochus's rule.
and did this happen in between his encounter with the Roman envoy and him setting up the temple to Zeus? I mean, the altar to Zeus.
The timeline of events indicates that Antiochus IV Epiphanes' encounter with the Roman envoy Gaius Papilius Laenas, where he was given the ultimatum to withdraw from Egypt and Cyprus, occurred in 168 BC. Following this encounter, Antiochus returned to Jerusalem, and it was in 167 BC that he enforced the Hellenization of Jerusalem, including the prohibition of Jewish rites and the establishment of the altar to Zeus in the Jewish temple. Therefore, the attacks on the Jews on a Sabbath likely occurred after his encounter with the Roman envoy and before the setting up of the altar to Zeus, as part of his campaign to suppress Jewish religious practices and enforce Hellenization. This sequence of events led to the Maccabean revolt and the eventual rededication of the temple. The desecration of the temple by Antiochus IV and the erection of the altar to Zeus are remembered as significant acts of persecution against the Jewish people.
All right, and one thing I want to point out once again is not only when the computer and other historians are doing these calendars and everything and giving us these dates, not only is there a little bit of a struggle because the Jewish month of Kislev can have like sometimes bleeds into two of our solar calendar years, right? Because it starts in December, could end sometime in January of the next year. So that's why we're seeing this 168 BC to 167 BC. Another thing also too is these people who are on a lunar solar calendar, they start their civil year in the month of Tishri. Like Tishri is actually like you have a New Year's celebration when the month of Tishri starts, right? So on top of that, when you're looking up this history, you don't know exactly like if it's an event that happens around September or October, and you're getting these two different dates. Sometimes that's because when someone's kind of converting it to our Roman calendar, that they're it's like you're starting a new Jewish year or a new lunar solar year right in September and October. So just to let you know, don't like freak out because you see like, oh my gosh, 168, now I see 167, and what's going on? This I mean, we know this happened all in the same year. Like Antiochus meets this Roman envoy, and now he gets turned back. Now he's got to head out there, and then on his way back, while he's to attack, he goes back and attacks Jerusalem. And one of the this event happens sometime in between there, right? To the best of my knowledge, to everything I'm understanding as I'm reading it. Because at first it confused me when I was first studying this because I didn't know a Jewish calendar. I didn't know much about the Seleucid calendar and all this other stuff. And to my knowledge, this is all happening in 1 year from the turning from Antiochus being turned back by that Roman envoy all the way to him setting up the altar to Zeus. And in the middle there, he's attacking the Jews on a Sabbath. So what I'm proposing here is that he attacks the Jews on a Sabbath, since that's the day they're most vulnerable. That Sabbath would have been about the 26th or 27th of Tishri. And then once he attacks the temple, now if you remove the menorah, or you take any of the items, you can no longer do your sacrifices. So this would stop the sacrifices. So if he goes into the temple and he robs the temple of these items, they can no longer do these sacrifices. So that would halt the sacrifices. So just because he sets up the altar to Zeus on Kislev 15, that doesn't mean this wasn't stopped before then, because if he would have attacked the temple and took the items out of it, well, now that would stop it. But the only thing the book of Maccabees records is when he sets up the altar. So we can account for about 1,103 days, but what we don't have is that 47 days. And what I'm showing you is that 47 days, it's quite possible that he can come from Egypt and Cyprus, arrive there about Tishri 26, attack the Jews on a Sabbath, and you would have your whole 1,150 days it takes. So this is mine. But the way we can know that we got this date pretty much correct, and that is basically, once you do a little, almost every single Christian I know will agree that the ram is Media Persia, just like it says down here in verses 20 through 25. It tells us plainly what these animals are. The two-horn ram you saw as the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat represents the king of Greece. And almost everybody will agree that this large horn is Alexander the Great. In fact, Josephus even records this, the Jews bringing the book to Alexander. Here, can you show me the quote in the works of Josephus where he mentions something about the Jews showing Alexander the Great the prophecy of Daniel 8 and showing him that he is part of prophecy? Sorry for these areas
Certainly.
of violence.
In the works of Josephus, there is an account related to Alexander the Great encountering the prophecy of Daniel. According to Josephus, during his visit to Jerusalem, Alexander was shown the book of Daniel, specifically the passage from Daniel 8. Here's the relevant quote from Josephus. And when the book of Daniel was shown to him, in which he had declared that one of the Greeks would destroy the empire of the Persians, he believed himself to be the one indicated, and in his joy he dismissed the multitude for the time being. But on the following day he summoned them again, and told them to ask for any gifts which they might desire. Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, Book 11, Chapter 8, Section 5. In this account, Alexander recognized himself as the Greek ruler prophesied in Daniel's writings, which predicted the downfall of the Persian Empire. His encounter with the Book of Daniel left a significant impression on him, and he treated the Jews favorably during his visit to Jerusalem. This event highlights the intersection of history, prophecy, and the impact of religious texts on influential figures of the time.
Okay, so we definitely know, without a doubt, that 334 should be the start of this prophecy, right? Without a doubt. So now, all these events that come afterwards, we just start going through here. And what would be the latest event? Let's see if we can find the latest event that would be talked about. Because it says in the later part of the reign, when the rebellion has reached its full measure, an insolent king skilled in intrigue would come to the throne. His power will be great, but not in his own. He will cause terrible destruction and succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy the mighty men along with the holy people. Through his craft and by his hand, he will cause deceit to prosper, and in his own mind, he will make himself great. In a time of peace, he will destroy many and even stand against the prince of princes. Yet he shall be broken off by but not by human hands. Well, I already showed you that Antiochus did not die by human hands. The latter part of their reign. Now, if you want to say their reign means all these Hellenistic kingdoms, well, it said the last Hellenistic kingdom ended in 30 BC. So now we have to find an event sometime between 30 BC and 334 BC that matches up to this. And I think this is all you like everything I've presented. It looks like it flows perfectly, right? And we have Bible documents, we have the works of Josephus saying so. There's no reason to think that why do we need any possible event? But I've seen people try to throw this into the future and stuff. But another thing we also know is that let's see here. I want to type this out so it knows exactly what website to go to, because I want to say according to BibleArchaeology.com. So I'd like to use this website because I've read so many essays that very researched archaeologists and Bible scholars have written, and it looks like this website has read probably more than me, right? And definitely the ones I thought were the best, they've actually wrote articles on them. So we seem to have similar outlooks as like who's doing the best research. So I think they have a very they come up with very good dates, right? So that's why I'm using them. If someone can find better and can argue for better dates, go ahead. But I'm using this, so I'm going to ask it according to BibleArchaeology.com. When was the Jewish temple built? Because see, we also know that that when Daniel's given this prophecy, there is no temple yet. In fact, there's nothing. God hasn't even told him there's going to be a temple. So, when was the second Jewish temple built, and when was it destroyed? So that's the question. When was the temple built? When was it destroyed?
According to the information available, the Second Jewish Temple, also known as Herod's Temple, was completed in 349 BCE. It was constructed after the return of the Jews from Babylonian exile and stood as a central place of worship until its destruction. The Second Temple was destroyed by the Romans
It
in
obviously
70
didn't use
CE
that
during the
website.
First Jewish Revolt. This event marked a significant and tragic moment in Jewish history, leading to widespread dispersion and the beginning of the Jewish.
Hold on. I thought the decree to rebuild the temple was given by Cyrus in 538 BC. So how did you come up with that date? I don't think it even used the source I asked it.
You are correct. The decree to rebuild the Second Jewish Temple was indeed given by Cyrus the Great in 538 BC. The construction of the temple began shortly thereafter and was completed in 516 BC, marking the end of the Babylonian exile and the beginning of the Second Temple period. The date I previously mentioned, 349 BCE, was incorrect, and I apologize for the confusion. The correct timeline is that the decree was issued in 538 BC, and the temple was completed 22 years later in 516 BC. The Second Temple stood until it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. Thank you for bringing this to my attention.
Boy, I'm so glad I study a little bit. Oops. I don't want to record that. I'm so glad I've studied a little bit. So anyway, the temple's built in 516 BC. It's destroyed in 70 CE. So we know This prophecy has to be completed sometime between there, because there's no sanctuary after 70 CE. So for anyone to try to even argue that this prophecy is something that's still yet to come, I just think it's completely insane. I think 70 CE, it's got to be done by 70 CE, because the temple's destroyed. That means there's no sanctuary. So what can this little horn defile? Possibly, what can it possibly defile if the sanctuary is not still around, right? So I mean, that's another thing. It's like, or now if we're going to say, oh, it didn't happen, it hasn't even happened yet. And I almost would say, then now you got to accuse him of being a false prophet. But I mean, when you see all these other details, I mean, it's like, come on. This prophecy was written before the temple was even built. So we know it's like at least around 550 BC, right? At least around that time. So this prophecy was given there. We see all these other details happening. Everything else matches. Even the guy dying without human hands, right? Which means that no human killed him. He died by disease. He died by something else, but it wasn't by the hands of another human being, right? So when you see all those details, it's like, what else could it possibly be? And we only see one sanctuary mentioned in here. And everything else it looks accurate. It looks like you can make an argument. So to me, there's no reason to think you have to look anywhere else. And I just get so sick of these false Bible teachers telling you this is some prophecy in the future, when what we should be doing is using prophecy like this to prove that the Bible is a book of God, right? That this did get fulfilled. And it kind of sickens me when there's people like calling themselves Bible teachers that can't get this right, especially when we're living in the day when we got AI and all this to help us do research. But as you can see here, there are problems. You have to go double check this by hand. But like I'm saying, you should be able to get a pretty good bearing on this, like at least some good direction, right? And I actually did all of this prior to even knowing about AI. So a lot of this research I had already done by hand years previously. Um, so I didn't. So that's kind of why I knew this like right off the top of my head so easily. Um, and I guess what I'll also show you, just to give some newer people some further confirmation. If we go to Daniel 11, it basically is telling you the same history. So I'm going to enlarge this because it says, and I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, stood up to strengthen and protect him. This might be, I'm using the Berean Bible, so I don't know how, I've never used it, and I'm just kind of looking through it, going over the translation. So I don't know how good this translation is, but anyway. Now then, I will tell you the truth. 3 more kings will arise in Persia, then a fourth who will be far richer than all the others, and by the power of his wealth, he will stir up everyone against the king of Greece. So we can see that there it's giving us a little bit more detail to what's happening. Then a mighty king will arise who will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. But as soon as he is established, his kingdom will be broken up and parcel out towards the 4 winds of heaven. It will not go to his descendants, nor will it have the authority with which he ruled, because the kingdom will be uprooted and given to others. So that's what we did see. The kingdom, Alexander the Great's kingdom, was broken up and parceled out towards the 4 directions. If you look at a map, you'll see that was split up into 4 different, like east, north, south, and west. And it did not go to his descendants. See here, we got another accurate detail. It went to his generals. We read that earlier, right? Nor will it have the authority with which he ruled, which it didn't, right? It didn't rule with the same kind of authority as Alexander the Great, because his kingdom will be uprooted and given to others. The king of the south will grow strong, but one of his commanders will grow even stronger and will rule his own kingdom with great authority. After some years, they will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south. Now, some of these details I'm not going to go into. I'm just kind of reading this because I want to get to a certain part. But this is all details that's happening with these Hellenistic kingdoms. After some years, they will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will go to the king of the north to seal the agreement, but his daughter will not retain her possession of power, nor will his strength. You know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, let me just go to the Geneva Bible. Because this might be just so I can show you just some things as we're doing this. Oops. There we go. Book of Daniel. I'm going to go to Geneva, though. If you go to the BibleGateway.com, and then you go to the Geneva gives some notes, which are kind of important. We're going to do Daniel 11, though. Thing about these notes down here, at the bottom, it'll give you notes about what's going on in these verses, because it's talking about whereof Cambyses now reign was the first, and the second was the first, the second Smerdis, the third Darius, the son of Histispus, I don't know how to pronounce some of these names, and the fourth Xerxes, all which were enemies of the people of God and stood against them. And so it's giving you kind of like all these like little details about what's going on. So this is what the the Protestants believed when, the Geneva book came out. A lot of them pretty much agreed with all this. So it's telling you about, as we're reading through these verses, the history that matches up to what these verses are detailing, right? So if someone wants to know further detail and get like, I guess like a quick, a quick grip on what might be going on within this passage. So right here it's talking about in Daniel 11, it's talking about the daughter of Ptolemy and Antiochus, but not Antiochus, Epiphanes. So I'm just showing you that real quick so we can, but let me just kind of go back up to these verses. I'm just wanting to show you that it's giving you more detail. So I'm going to just kind of skip over some of this and just get to the part where I think it's starting to talk about Antiochus. Which might be right around here. It's been a while since I went over this. Again, he shall set his face to enter with the power of his whole kingdom and his confederates with him. Thus he will do, and he shall give him the daughter of women to destroy her, but she will not stand on his side, neither be for him. After this, he shall turn his face unto the isles, and they shall take many. But a prince shall cause his shame to light upon him. Besides that, he shall cause his own shame to turn upon himself. For he shall turn his face towards the forts of his own land, but he shall be overthrown and fall and be no more found. No, this isn't Antiochus yet. Then shall stand up in his place in the glory of the kingdom one that shall raise taxes, but after a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in wrath nor in battle. And in his place shall stand up a vile person. I think this is where Antiochus comes in. And in his place shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. And the arms shall be overthrown with a flood before him, and shall be broken, and also the prince of the covenant. Now, this is not talking about this prince of the covenant here. I want to get down to here because it's not talking about what people think when they first hear that word. So, meaning Ptolemaeus, Philopator's son, who was this child's cousin, this child's cousin Jermaine, and is here called the Prince of the Covenant because he was chief and all others followed after his conduct. So it's not talking about Jesus or anything. just so people aren't confused when they see the Prince of the Covenant. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and overcome a small people. And he shall enter in the quiet and plentiful province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall divide among them the prey and the spoil and the substance. Yea, he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. Some of this wording is a little hard. I'm getting to the main point. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall forecast and practice against him. Yea, they that feed the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall and be slain. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and that they shall talk of deceit at one table, but shall not avail, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. Then he shall return to his land with great substance, for his heart shall be against the holy covenant. So he shall do and return to his own land. So I think this is talking about Antiochus right here, Antiochus Epiphanes. Then he shall return to his land with great substance, for his heart shall be against the holy covenant. So he shall do and return to his homeland. And at the appointed time he shall return. He shall return and come towards the south, but the last shall not be as the first. So I think this is talking about a second time he's going to attack with Egypt, if I'm not mistaken. For the ships of Kittim, so this is the ships of Rome. So earlier when I talked about that Roman envoy, for the ships of Kittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be sorry and shall return and fret against the holy covenant. So he shall do, and even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. So what I think this means is have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. Was I said there was a rebellion going on with the Jews, right? So some of the Jews were actually having an alliance with Antiochus. And so they were the ones that were forsaking the holy covenant. And so I think they were also helping him plan when's the best time to attack. Probably told him on the Sabbath they're not going to attack back, right? That's, what I'm believing is going on. Which also it sounds pretty accurate, when from what I went over all the historical information I went on earlier. Yeah, we know a Roman envoy told Antiochus he's got an ultimatum: enter Egypt or turn back. He turns back, and everything follows that timeline. He did go attack the Jews on the Sabbath. He did go in that same year and set up a altar to Zeus. So all this makes sense. And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary. So we know that happened too. And they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall set up an abominable desolation. Well, we know he set up an altar to Zeus, didn't he? And such as wickedly break the covenant shall cause to sin by flattery. The people that do know their God shall prevail and prosper. Well, we do know that eventually the Maccabean revolt did prevail. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, the flame, and the captivity, and by spoil many days. Well, 1,150 days is many days. Now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help, but many shall cleave unto them feignedly. So, and some of them, understanding, shall fall to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, till the time be out, for there is a time appointed. Now, after this, there's a little bit of disagreement what happens, but most people think this all has to do with Antiochus. It looks like it fits with everything I've pointed out. So, but I would say in general, when I say you can figure this out quickly, when I'm saying quickly, I mean not every single detail, but can you know the ballpark of when this prophecy takes place? Right? Yes, you can. You can know the ballpark. We know the Jewish temple was erected in 516 BC. It was destroyed in 70 AD. Now we got a sanctuary. It's being trampled on. So this event has to happen sometime between there. We see Alexander the Great conquering Media Persia, and we see his kingdom get divided up into 4 kingdoms. We see this guy Antiochus coming out of one of the 4. So when it says, from one of these 4 horns, a little horn emerge, right? And we did see that. We saw that he called himself a god, so that means it magnified itself even into the prince of the host. When it says prince of the host, they mean God, right? So, and it removed the daily sacrifice, overthrew the place of a sanctuary. We see all these details, and we know that the Jews were rebellion, Hellenizing, and we know 1,103 days can equal up to 2,300 evening morning sacrifices. We know this can occur sometime between Antiochus getting turned back from that Roman envoy that happened around June 22nd of 168 BC. So can he get there by September of the same year? Yes. So we know he can get there by about September of that same year, moving that army. And so that seems to fit, right? So, and we saw the book of Maccabees, Kislev, 145 of the Seleucid, which would be about 168 BC, all the way to Seleucid 148, which is Kislev 25 on 148, which would be about 164 if it trails into the into January, right? So it'd be January 164. So to me, all this fits. We got enough years and months to fit this. Dies without human hand. Brought that up. I don't know what else there would be. I mean, and so I think most people should be able to figure this out and know. All you gotta do is go look at the Greek kingdom, look when it started, look when it ended. That would, to me, be the most probable part, because it's talking about the king of Greece conquering Media Persia. Okay, 334 BC. In the latter part of their reign, well, if we're saying their reign, we're talking about these Greek kingdoms. Well, we know Rome ate up all these Greek kingdoms by 30 BC. So I would say 334 to 30 BC, we need to find an event in there. And so right there, you start off from that point, then you start going through all these details, looking for events between those 2 points, and you should figure it out. Oh boy. Here's Prima Scriptura, a Seventh-day Adventist. He says it does not fit if Jesus came later in Matthew 24:50. No, it does fit. You know what, Prima? I gave you 4 hours to tell me how to interpret 4 verses, and you can't do it. And you want to sit here and tell me my interpretation doesn't make sense when I showed everyone all the history. And I asked you for 4 hours. For 4 hours, right? How do you interpret verses 8 through 12? And I didn't ask you, no, let's sit here and argue. No, I said, just tell me as you're reading that what you are seeing that is going on. And I asked you that several times in 4 hours, and you couldn't tell me. But yet you have the nerve to try to say, "Oh, nothing matches up." What? No, I went through history where even historians say it matches up. Even Porphyry, the first person to ever attack in one of the atheists to attack the Bible. He even knew that, hey, it's no use attacking this prophecy and saying it didn't come true. Everybody accepts it. So what I'm going to start to propose is that, nah, this was written around 160 BC. So this isn't some prophetic thing. This was written after the fact. That's why it looks so like it matches up so well. See, even Porphyry, an atheist. See, so now I'm wondering how much light you have in your eyes when this atheist can say, oh, this looks like history, but you're sitting there like, oh, I don't even know if it matches up. It doesn't even look good. What? You actually got professors of history like John Collins, atheist, doesn't believe in the Bible at all, and he will admit that it's pretty much an accurate description of history. John Collins just argues that no, this was written after the fact. Like and I don't understand how a Christian, someone who tries to call themselves a Christian, would even claim that this was not hit like why you would not even accept this as history when atheists accept it. It boggles my mind. Completely boggles my mind. And well, you know what? There's only one temple here, Prima Scriptura. No, I wasn't trying to fit my days. I was asking you several times while you kept saying, no, duh, it can't fit. Like, duh, it can't fit in there. And it's like, how? No, 1,150 days can fit into some time period between 334 BC and 30 BC. Hey, you want me to do some quick math for you? I can bring up a calculator, and you're going to feel real dumb when you see this, man. It's, let me see here. Here, I'm going to bring up a calculator on my screen. Let's see here. The temple was made. Well, no, I'm not even going to go by the temple. We're just going to go by Alexander conquering Media Persia, and then 30 BC, which is the end, right? So now we see 304 years, right, from the time Alexander conquers Media Persia all the way until 30 BC when the Roman Empire conquers the last of the Greek kingdoms. That's why I got 334 minus 30. 304. Okay, can 1,150 days fit into 304? Let's see here. That's 3 Jewish years plus maybe 2 Jewish months almost. About a month and a half. One Jewish month and a half, right? So that's 45 days. So 45 days plus 3 years. So look at this. I think if we just round it up to 4, right? Oh my gosh, I got an extra 300 years left over. Of course mine fits. Right? It fits in there. I don't even know why you say it doesn't fit. 4 years can fit into 304 years. Because look at this. Look, minus 4. I'm going to do this. I can do it in my head, but oh my gosh, we got 300 years. So don't tell me my 3 point, like what, 3.1, 3.2 years can't fit into 304 years. No, I rounded it all the way up to 4 and it fits. Got 300 years left over. So don't tell me that. And plus in here, I kept asking you to read verses 8 through 12 for a reason. Why did I say that? Because when you read verses 8 through 12, how many sanctuaries do we see mentioned? We see how many times do I see the word sanctuary mentioned? We're going to read from here. From one of these horns, a little horn emerged, grew extensively towards the south, towards the east, and towards the beautiful land. It grew as high as the host of heaven, and cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars of the earth and trampled them. So far, I don't even see the word sanctuary. So verse 11, it magnified itself even to the prince of the host, and it removed his daily sacrifice and overthrew the place of his sanctuary. Aha. So we see sanctuary mentioned one time. And in the rebellion, the host and the daily sacrifice were given over to the horn, and it flung the truth to the ground and prospered with whatever it did. So I see only the sanctuary mentioned one time. So this can only be one sanctuary, right? So now I get to the question. Then I heard a holy one speaking, another holy one said to him, "How long until the fulfillment of the vision of the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary and the host to be trampled upon?" So it must be asking about this one sanctuary. So I see only one sanctuary. You tried to tell me there was two sanctuaries in these verses. That's why I wanted you to read it, right? That's why I wanted you to read 8 through 12 so you would see for yourself there's only one sanctuary. And you were trying to say there's two sanctuaries in here. You said there's an earthly and a heavenly. How does this one word transition into two sanctuaries? It says his sanctuary. There's one sanctuary. So either you have this little horn that is going into heaven, if you want to say this is the sanctuary that's in heaven, which is what Seventh day Adventists are arguing. That's who I'm arguing with right now. He wants to say, oh, it's going up into heaven. And then they want to say this little horn is Rome slash the papacy, and it's going up into heaven. Wow, man, this thing's got like supernatural powers or something. It's going up into heaven and trample it. Because this clearly says this little horn is trampling the sanctuary, and it's not the sins of the people trampling. But see, the 17th Adventists will say, "Oh no, Jesus's blood transfers sin; it makes the sanctuary of heaven dirty. That's how the sanctuary gets dirty in heaven. It's through Jesus." And then we go, "Well, are you saying Jesus is a little horn?" No, the papacy's a little horn. Well, then, but this is saying that the little horn is making the sanctuary is trampling the sanctuary, but then you say that Jesus's blood tramples the sanctuary because it's the blood, it's the sins of the Christians, the sins of the saints that go through Jesus's blood and gets transferred into the heavenly sanctuary. And then when I try to explain it like that, you're like, no, no, no. And it's like, well, I'm trying to read the text, and you guys are telling me one thing. I'm reading the text, and then by applying what you're telling me the little horn is, I'm applying that to what's going on in the text, and then you guys keep saying no. That's why I kept asking you, read me this and explain what is going on. I'm not asking you for proof at this point. I'm just trying to understand what's going through your mind as you read this, because I think you're confusing yourself because you're trying so hard to make this false prophet seem like a real prophet. So the problem is, it's like my way is real simple. When I explain this to you, I didn't have to go, oh, give me 4 hours to explain it. No, it only I can explain. You see, let me ask myself the same question real quick, and I'll show you how quick I can do it. Chris, please exegete and tell me what's going on from verses 8 through 12. Oh, okay. So we got this little horn. The scope became great and at the highest power. So we see this is Alexander the Great. His horn gets broken off. These four kingdoms come up into its place, and so it's in each cardinal direction of the compass, right? So we've got one of his kingdoms on the east, one gets divided up to the west, one south, one north. From one of these horns, a little horn emerges, and I say that's Antiochus Epiphanes, and grows extensively towards the south, towards the east, and towards the beautiful land. I said, Jerusalem would be the beautiful land. It grew up as high as the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the stars, some of the hosts, and some of the stars to earth. I said, this is referring to the Jewish people, and the stars would be like the main leaders and people like that, or probably like the priest and things like that. So and it did magnify because he said he's God manifest. That's what Antiochus said. So he is magnifying himself up to the host of heaven, and he's casting some of the hosts down to the ground, and he's trampling on them, and he's doing all this, right? He's putting them down. It magnified itself into the prince of the host, and it removed the daily sacrifice. I said Antiochus came into the temple and stopped the daily sacrifice. And earlier in this video, I said he did this on a Sabbath, I believe, around the 26th or 27th of Tishri. And overthrew the place of his sanctuary. That would be the God's sanctuary on earth, right? That was in this temple. So the Jewish temple has a sanctuary in it. So I'm saying all this is happening on earth in one place and in the rebellion. So I'm saying the Jews rebelled, and because of this, the host and the daily sacrifice were given over to the horn, Antiochus. So God is given the host, which are the Jewish people, and the daily sacrifice are given over to the little horn, and it flung the truth to the ground and prospered in whatever it did. So I'm saying Antiochus did all this. So now, and when I ask you, just give me like a rough explanation of all this that's going on according to your SEA theology, and you couldn't do it. You see how fast I did this? I did this almost in 5 minutes, just explaining this. Why would it take you 4 hours? You know, like that's because it's so convoluted. It's not that hard. I'm not even asking you about like little details like towards the south and towards the east and towards the beautiful land. You don't have to explain precisely what this means. I'm just wondering, who is this little horn, and how was it going up to the host of heaven? Because it says it grew as high as the host of heaven. What does it mean when it cast some of the hosts and some of the stars to earth and trampled them? It magnified itself into the prince of hosts. But see, what I wanted to really get to is, what does it mean when it removed his daily sacrifice and overthrew the place of a sanctuary? How can this be both heaven and earth? Right? And when did Rome do this? Because it was actually Antiochus doing it. Because you want to say that you want to say this is 2,300 years down here, and you want to say that Rome is doing this in between this 2,300 years, but when it was actually Greece doing it, right? And actually, the Roman government for a time protected the Jews. The Jews around, what was it? What was it, like 60 BC? It's like the Roman government would give them some favorable allowances that they did not give to other people of other religions. Like other people, like the Roman government did not impose certain things on the Jews, like, oh, you will worship the emperor, you will do this. You know, it's like they kind of left the Jews alone, and it's like, um, for the most part, they weren't bothered too much by Rome, unlike the people practicing other religions in that Roman government, right, and the Roman Empire. And so, I don't know if you could say they were being persecuted by them. See, your interpretation doesn't make sense, because we can see this little horn is the one persecuting them. Yet, wait a minute, we have Antiochus persecuting them in 168 through 164 BC. But if he's persecuting them then, but it's supposed to, but but you're saying he's not the little horn, but he's persecuting them. See, it doesn't make sense. Why isn't Rome persecuting them? Because I thought you said Rome was doing it, but now Rome's doing it, and it's within this 2,300 years, which you say is from 457 to 1844. It just does not make sense. Right? And that's why I kept asking you over and over again, please explain this. Please walk me through it. And you refuse to do it. And then you want to sit here and you want to talk nonsense to me and like, oh, your interpretation doesn't make sense. Well, why don't you explain it to everybody? And I asked you, and I'm never going to let you on my show again, because what I want you to first do is make a video, because I go to your channel, you know how to make videos. So why don't you make a video with the courtesy of, after wasting everyone's time for 4 hours last week, why don't you have the courtesy to go make a video and properly explain this to us and just show us how much better your interpretation is, all right? Just show us. Oh, you can't. That's because it sounds like nonsense. And now when we add to it the fact that you have some little girl going by some calendar and she's got some visions, but these people have a calendar that's really weird because it got Passovers in May. And a lot of you had a hard time after I showed off all that evidence and walked through multiple times SDA documents showing that they have they were going by a calendar that starts the month of Nisan in April consistently. And like that one day, it was started April. What was it? It was like, I'm looking at 2020. You know what? Here, I'll just go to this one part here. I wish I could just get a year because I don't think there's. And maybe I can do it like this. Fix this part. 1843. Because what I want to do is like, see, and you've showed that in this one calendar you guys had, you guys were starting your month of Nisan in April 29th, right? And we can see on this is a rabbinic calendar I'm using. I'm not using your so-called messed up Karaite calendar, but I showed you in your own documents, you were starting on April 1843. You started your month of Nisan on January 29th. Now, you're basically substituting the Jewish month of the year for liar, or I think that's how you actually pronounce it. So you're substituting Nisan for this month right here. That's going to land you on like the 14th of what year was? Yeah, the 14th of May. Like that's insane. Like who has a Passover? Like Friday, or not Friday, Thursday. I think it was Thursday. We had a full moon that night. And you're telling me that would have been your Passover. Like that's crazy. And I showed you from your own documents. Like no Jew keeps a calendar like this, and I want proof of it. If there really is a Jew that keeps it, show me some proof. So now we have this weird calendar that no one keeps. You have this girl that has visions, and none of you have ever told me what other prophets do you guys recognize that came after AD 100 all the way to 1844. What other prophets do you guys recognize? Now, if you go, well, we don't recognize any other prophets. Well, if you don't recognize any other prophets, now we got a big problem, because are you telling me that you don't think there was any other prophets, and then suddenly this girl comes out of nowhere and she's a prophet, and she's got this weird calendar and this really weird way of reconciling Daniel, right? And it's like, maybe this girl that thinks she's a prophet, maybe if there hasn't been a prophet for about 1800 years, 1700 years, maybe she's not a prophet. I mean just I know that sounds crazy, but maybe she's not a prophet. And if maybe she's not a prophet, then maybe what we should do is go look at everything she believes. Oh wow, May Passover. I don't know about that. And then you guys, one of the weirdest things you try to tell me to defend yourselves is that, oh well, we're not even supposed to practice these feasts or these calendars. Then why does this even matter? Because it's like the whole reason for someone to argue that you no longer have to keep like all these other Jewish feasts, right? Now Passover, I will argue we are to recognize that. Just because the early church, when they had that quarter-deciman controversy, the controversy that Polycarp and when Roman Bishop Anicetus kind of were knocking heads, Polycarp was saying, hey, this should be on the 14th of Nisan, not on your Roman day that you want to declare. And Anicetus was like, no, I have I have apostolic authority, and I can sit here and I can make it to where Easter falls on just Sunday once a year, right? And so they're arguing about that, and Polycarp and Polycrates are arguing, no, we've learned this from the disciples John and Philip, and this is what they did, and we didn't learn of any sort of like custom where it's going to be on the Sunday once a year. And they were arguing about that. But here's the key thing. The one thing that you Adventists don't seem to understand is they the one argument that they agreed upon was that it should be celebrated. They were only arguing what day. but they all agreed. I want you to go find me Christians that said, no, we should never even observe it at all. Find me those people. See, that shows you that you're even more cultish than what what most people think you are. Because think about what a cult mindset that is, where every Christian in early Christianity observed either Passover, or later on they observed Easter, right? The Easter Sunday. I'm saying it's Easter because that's just separated from the 14th of Nisan. The difference between that and Sunday. Okay, I already know how those words are interchangeable. Don't go there with me, people. I'm saying this to easily show the difference, right? So Passover and Easter, they all agreed one of those dates should be celebrated. In the early church, you're the only Christian church I know of, that says no, we shouldn't even observe either of them. Where did this teaching come from? Oh, Ellen White, your little prophet. It's like, to me, it's kind of showing your true colors when you're saying, oh, even though Jesus is called the Passover Lamb and the Lamb of God, let's just do away with this date. Huh? It's like, why would you even think that? That does not make any sense to me. Um, but see, one thing I noticed in these early arguments is I don't see them going, now, as far as the Day of Atonement goes, I don't see Polycarp arguing about the Day of Atonement with the Roman bishop. I don't see Polycarp arguing over the Sukkot with the Roman bishop. I don't see him arguing all these other days with the Roman bishop. Man, it could just be that they picked this one because that might have been the biggest issue, and maybe they still did keep all these other dates. I don't know. So maybe someone can go, well, Jesus fulfilled everything else, and we still keep, Passover in recognition of him, just because, that's what it, says in other Bible passages. It looks like they were still observing Passover in recognition of Jesus being the Passover lamb. But if you're going to argue that that you no longer but see, the whole argument would be that Jesus fulfilled it. So since Jesus fulfilled this, we no longer have to observe those other festivals, right? So if Jesus fulfilled it, we no longer have to observe these other yearly feasts. Then why all of a sudden are you making a big deal out of this Day of Atonement and saying, oh, Jesus went into the heavenly sanctuary on that day, to be the antitypical Day of Atonement, this cosmic Day of Atonement? But yet you're saying that we don't even have to keep these feasts. To me, you would still have to be keeping the calendar, because if something wasn't fulfilled yet, you would still keep the calendar until it is fulfilled. Because these prophecies are going by whose time? God's time. You don't get to change the times. This is going by God's times, because if we're still on a prophetic calendar, we still have to go by God's calendar. And God's calendar is laid out in Genesis 1:14. It's the lights in the sky that determine the day, the year, and the months. So it's not determined by Ellen White and her visions, or by any people who's determining it in her group and then she's confirming it with her visions. It's determined by God alone. And it just doesn't make sense to me that you're going to say, oh, there's still this prophecy that has to happen. Well, it was given during when Daniel was using a Jewish calendar. This calendar would still have to be observed, and it would still have to have the same months and times. But now it's like you're arguing more towards like what the Roman bishop would say, is that, oh no, we don't even have to observe these anymore. And it's so much so that we can even change Easter to Sunday, and we don't even have to have it on Passover. But I think part of the reason was there was a lot of anti-Semitism for that change. And that's a big reason why because they didn't want to have nothing to do with the Jews, because they would even have these like little things to make sure it was way off from Passover, right? So it's like, we don't even want Passover to fall on the same Sunday. So they came up with these rules where it's got to be 7 days later, and so it's like, well, Jesus rising 7 days after Passover doesn't make any sense when the Bible says 3 days. You'd think, if anything, they'd have a constant celebration for 3 days after the Passover, not just picking Sunday and being like, oh, we're just going to make sure it's Sunday after every on the Sunday after the full moon that happens right after the vernal equinox. I think that's what they decided on, right? And so they said, well, the first new moon after the vernal equinox, that following Sunday, we're going to have Easter. And I think that's what the Roman bishop decided. And it's like, so it's like not going by God's calendar whatsoever at all, nothing biblical. Just no biblical meaning to that date whatsoever. Just a Roman bishop declaring it. But the Seventh-day Adventists would argue the bishop had plenty of right to do that because it's been done away with. And if it's been done away with, that must be because Jesus fulfilled every single thing. If Jesus fulfilled everything, and therefore the Roman bishop, nothing has to be, we don't have to observe Passover or any other date anymore. Well, then what's the problem with the Roman bishop changing, that date around? And then why would you even think that you're going to have this Day of Atonement later on in 1844 when the calendar's been done away with? Because the feasts have been done away with. Because the main reason to keep the feast was to know the Moedim and stuff, right? So you would know the feast. But you're saying, oh, it's done away. So it's just a lot of inconsistent arguments, because if there's anything left to be fulfilled, then it would still need to be kept, and the calendar would still need to be observed. So I feel like you argue against your own points so much. Oh, hey Stephanie. Hey everybody. I'm not having an open mic. Not after last week. Maybe next week I will. Stop. Send me. You're not getting no link. You're not coming on my show until you make a video showing me that you're gonna explain Daniel 8 verses 8 through I actually make it 8 through 14. I want to know all that, really, because it's like I don't see the second sanctuary being mentioned in there. Then we just don't see a second. I only see the word sanctuary one time, and you were on my show telling me there's two sanctuaries, an earthly and a heavenly. And you're not explaining how there's this transition between the little horn overthrowing the earthly sanctuary and overthrowing the heavenly. Because look at this flat out says overthrew the place of his sanctuary. Who overthrew it? The little horn. As it says, from one of these horns a little horn emerged. So it's this little horn that overthrew the place of his sanctuary. There's only one sanctuary being mentioned. So you're telling me the little horn overthrew the heavenly sanctuary or the earthly sanctuary? Which one? Because it's clear. There's only it doesn't say sanctuaries. There's no, that's not plural. It's his sanctuary. Okay, so if it overthrew his sanctuary and you said this was the earthly sanctuary, then it has to be, you're basically telling me the papacy or / Rome overthrew the place of his earthly sanctuary. Because that's what you were saying in my video. Go watch it again. You were saying that hey, wasn't the Jewish temple destroyed by Rome in 70 AD? Yeah, it was destroyed. Okay, but now when you go down to verse 13, how does this make sense? Because it says, then I heard a holy one speaking, another one said to him, how long until the fulfillment of the vision of the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary and the host to be trampled? So it says this sanctuary is going to be surrendered. To me, my explanation makes more sense, that God stopped protecting the Jews, surrendered the sanctuary over to Antiochus so he could persecute them for their rebellion for 1,150 days. But what are you saying? You're saying that that the sanctuary is being surrendered over to here for 2,300 evening. Well, you say years, right? 2,300 years. And this is clearly saying, it's asking how long till the fulfillment of this vision of the daily sacrifice of rebellion that causes desolation. How was the daily sacrifice trampled on in 457. They had just started. In fact, the opposite happens in Ezra. If you read Ezra 7 and how everything's being restored, it's not being trampled, it's being restored. They're like Ezra's teaching the Jews the laws and everything. And this is being restored. And the sanctuary is not being trampled on. You have the gall to ask me how my explanation doesn't make sense when just this wording alone, and then you would take hours to even try to explain it, and then you still won't explain it. I mean, that's the frustration with this. It's like, okay, this is clearly anyone who's reading English would clearly be like, when they, okay, these holy ones, they don't, they've only witnessed this particular vision. This is the only vision they're even talking about. They've had just saw this vision. So now they're asking each other. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another one, holy one said to him, how long until the fulfillment of the vision, this particular vision of the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary and the host to be trampled on? And it says, and it will take 2,300 evening mornings, and then the sanctuary will be properly restored. Okay, so 2,300 years is what you're saying, but it wasn't trampled in 457. Show me what the difference is between what was going on in 458 BC and then what happened suddenly in 457 BC. What change do we see? When I'm looking at this, I'm seeing like, okay, it, like, you know, the Jews didn't really have the law established. Now they're establishing the law. They're reading the commandments. Ezra's teaching the Jews how to properly do everything. He's given money to help finance all these the starting of all these Jewish customs and practices and rebuilding Jerusalem. It doesn't sound like there's a little horn. It sounds like the exact opposite's happening. Right? So if the exact opposite's happening, how can you say this is starting in 457 BC when we're not seeing no trampling? Clearly, it's saying this little horn is overthrowing the place of a sanctuary. And then these people are asking how long. It's as simple as that. This is just simple reading comprehension. You ask, find me anyone that find me a single person. Here's another thing I keep asking you, SDAs. Show me a scholar or anyone besides SDAs before 1800, right? Find me anyone that was reading this and they think this question referred all the way back to the Persian Empire. This doesn't even make sense. How do you even read? Because in 457 BC, that's the Media-Persian Empire, right? That's when Cyrus has long told back in 538 BC to restore the temple. It gets built in 516 BC. So the temple's already up. Then later on, Artaxerxes is helping to fund these practices to get the Jews to start in the 7th year of his reign. He's given Ezra money, and Ezra's going about teaching everyone. So they're not rebelling at this time. They're actually listening to Ezra and Malachi as they're teaching these people to restore what they used to be, right? So, I mean, like, so there's no rebellion going on in 457 BC. And so when I'm reading this, it's like, how long until the vision of the daily sacrifice? Well, guess what? This daily sacrifice does not refer to anything about the Persian Empire. So you cannot start it all because SDAs want to start this all the way back in 457 BC. But I showed you Alexander the Great conquers Media-Persia in 334 BC. So you cannot make this question relate to something before 334 BC. I mean, it's just, that's not even sensible. They are clearly talking about the little horn. How long until the fulfillment of the vision of the daily sacrifice? So it's asking you specifically about the vision of the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, which that's what caused it. The Jewish rebellion is what caused the desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary and the host to be trampled. It's asking about these things. It did not ask a single question about the Persian Empire. You're out, like you're just out of your mind, or have horrible reading comprehension to look at that question and go, "Oh, it's talking about the Persian Empire and media Persia. It's talking about the media Persian Empire." How in the world does someone do that? How in the world do you see that question and you go, "Oh, it's talking about that"? No, it's clearly talking about verses 9 through 12. Clearly. And now that we know that this sanctuary only lasted between 516 BC and 70 AD, we know this prophecy had to happen sometime between then. So you can't extend it past that. And there's no mention of another sanctuary. We don't see any allusion. There's sanctuary is only mentioned once from verse 9 through 12. It's only mentioned one time. So your interpretation doesn't even make sense. So I'm not going to allow you to come on here, waste my time until I see you guys make a video and you guys explain it better, instead of telling me every time I try to explain your interpretation, you go, "Oh, no, that's wrong. We don't believe this." And it's like, well, then explain it to me. 4 hours go by, no explanation. No, not one of my viewers can tell me how you guys explained it. Not one of them. They're like, they're all like, "Oh, no, I don't know how they explained it." That's because they never did. They never did. They wasted all of our time. And they want to call themselves prophecy experts and the remnant, and they just do nothing but waste people's time with foolishness. And I mean, really, a little girl who's 19 years old has a vision. There's no prophets from 100 AD till 1844 that you guys can recognize. So it's not like, "Oh yeah, there's prophets all the time." No, whoa, one prophet comes out of nowhere. Whoa, that should be a red flag. Like if I say I'm a prophet and you're like, "Well, there's no prophet since Ellen White," you'd probably have a red flag come up, right? I mean, come on now. But yeah, here's this little girl, first person, and it's like they're saying all this weird stuff that doesn't make sense. This flat out didn't make sense the way you guys laid it out to people. And I mean, just insane. I mean, exactly, Stephanie. I'm sorry I haven't been keeping up with but I want to make sure I focused and got all my points across on this. Yes, he couldn't. That's exactly right. The Prima Scriptura had a chance to answer this for 4 hours. That was painful for a lot of people. And it was definitely painful to me because my kids let me know. And I kept explaining to my kids, well, I kept thinking it was just going to be 5 more minutes. I've let him explain. I don't want to interrupt him. I want to be courteous. Give him 5 more minutes. Give him 5 more. And then 4 hours later, after me asking again, and every time I would ask it, I would think, okay, he's got to make one little detailed point, and then he's going to explain. Nope. Then he's starting to question me. "Oh, how does I don't want to know about I'm trying to understand you. So people shut up when you say, "Oh, you're misrepresenting me," because clearly, to a lot of people, when you were explaining this to people, and you're starting to relate this back to Daniel verse 9:27. Okay, well, we see in verse 9:27. Let me just get that on the screen, because this is what you were doing, and this is how a lot of people who were talking to me later privately, they were like, "Whoa, he's calling Jesus the Antichrist," because some of them are futurists, right? And they're thinking you're calling Jesus the Antichrist. And because this is how messed up your view is. Because when you get down to verse 9:27, some of these futurists that were asking me about this, and they were saying, okay, this Seventh Day Adventist that was on your show, he was saying that verses 9 through 12 relate to Daniel 27 and the temple. And he's telling me, from what I'm hearing, and this is a futurist telling me this. He says, "And he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease." And that Seventh Day Adventist says this is also relating to 70 AD. So therefore, he's saying that but he also thinks Jesus in verse 27. So is he saying Jesus is the Antichrist? And I had to explain, and it was hard for me to explain. It was frustrating to explain because I'm like, no, these guys are really mixed up, and no, what you're hearing is actually that crazy, because they're trying to say that this is representing this the temple in 70 AD in this verse, right? In Daniel 9. And then he's also trying to say it's a heavenly temple. And he's like, well, how's he making that transition? I'm like, I don't know. I kept asking him and he wouldn't go over it. Right? Because you're also saying Rome destroyed it, because you refer me back to verse 27 of Daniel 9:27. And you go, well, Rome made the temple desolate. And then you relate that back to the Daniel 8. So here we go. We got you saying Rome's doing some of this. And then okay, we go, and then you're saying the little horn is the one who's also who destroys the temple. And you say this is the little horn, and then we see that the sacrifices get stopped, right? His daily sacrifice removed his daily sacrifice. So this is where some of the futurists are like, whoa, they're really satanic, because they're saying that Jesus is this little horn, because clearly they're saying Jesus stops the sacrifice in Daniel 9:27, but they're also saying the SDAs are also saying that this little horn is stopping the daily sacrifice. So do you see how messed up that sounds when you try to say that Daniel 9 and Daniel 8 have to merge? Because now it's really confusing to people. Whereas I say this is a completely different different prophecy. I say this prophecy happens much earlier than Daniel 9:27. I'm saying this prophecy, this is all done between 168 BC and 164, and it's done over a 3.2 year period, right? So, and then later on, we see in Daniel 9:27, this has nothing to do with Daniel 8. It has all to do with Rome and Jesus. And so now we have Jesus who gets slain in the middle of a 7 year sabbatical cycle. And then we have Rome destroying the temple later on after about 40 years, right? And so to me, my explanation is simple, but when you guys keep trying to merge both of these together, it gets real messy to people. And they just go, well, it sounds like the SDAs are just real hard-headed about not agreeing that Daniel 9:27 is actually talking about the Antichrist. Because that's what they're thinking, to most of their views. So don't think you're explaining this plainly. You guys need to sit there and carefully go over this and understand that when you guys say these Daniel 9:27 and then Daniel 8 verses 9 through 12 relate to each other, that people's minds are like, whoa, you guys are trying to say that it almost sounds to them like you're trying to say Jesus is the Antichrist. And then you're like, no. And then it's like, well, how does Jesus get the heavenly temple? How does the heavenly sanctuary get dirty? And you're like, well, through the blood of Jesus. Well, if you say it gets dirty through the blood of Jesus, then you're really making him sound like the little horn. And then you guys try to like go all over the place trying to maneuver out of that, it sounds like from Ellen White's writings that it's the sins of the saints that make it the sanctuary dirty, that gets transferred there through the blood of Jesus. And then later on, Jesus is going to transfer the sins to the goat. And it's like, well, so doesn't that mean the sanctuary still not restored if it's still the sins are still up there? But it says after 2300 evenings and mornings, the sanctuary will be restored. But yet the Seventh-day Adventists say, no, it's not restored because the sins haven't been placed on the goat yet. Well, then the prophecy hasn't came true. I mean, there's like so many holes. And then you guys have the just the nerve to sit there and tell me my explanation doesn't make sense when I have had, how many hours have I spent, man? About 20 hours where I gave the SDA about almost 60% of the time or more to explain this to me from their view. Sometimes, some of these shows, I have to let the SDA talk for almost 80% of the time over a course of 3 hours. And we have yet to, like, where you guys have made this make sense. And you guys claim it makes sense, and it's like it doesn't make sense. How was it properly restored? It doesn't say it's starting to be cleansed. It's restored at this point. It gets restored. It's justified after this point. It's been vindicated. It's these types of words that end with a completed action with the ed on the end of it. Completed, not will be complete, not completing. It's completed, restored, vindicated. All words that have a past tense, like it's done, it's over with, not an ongoing. So it doesn't say after it will take 223 evenings and mornings, then it will be, then the cleansing will start to happen. Then Jesus will start, because that's where are these sins going as Jesus is investigating it? Aren't they still in the sanctuary? And aren't people still sinning? So isn't it still being added to it? So it's still getting dirtier, right? So that's why your thing doesn't even make sense, because Seventh-day Adventists believe that there's going to be this investigative judgment that started in 1844. And so this is the so-called start of the cleansing process. Even though the text says restored, it's supposed to be done at this point. The SDAs will twist the words and say, no. What Daniel really meant to say was cleansing. It's Jesus is starting to sweep up his mess, right? So Jesus is starting to clean up his mess, where he got the sanctuary all dirty with his blood. As his blood defiled it. So now he's cleaning up his mess. So now he's going through the record books, and yet, if the record book, him going through the record books symbolizes the sanctuary beginning to be cleansed, it's like, how is that cleansing if it's still in the sanctuary? Because it hasn't been placed on the goat. Because they believe that Satan represents the scapegoat, and that sins have to be placed on Satan, and then Satan's thrown into hell, and then that's when the sanctuary is restored. But it's like, how? But did people stop sinning? Did people stop sinning in 1844? So that must mean they're still being added to there. So it's not being cleansed, because it's just getting dirtier. Or did the records of sin stop? Are you telling me the record of sin got stopped in 1844? And now, like right now, we're in this like sinless period of time, maybe, to where it doesn't go up into the heavens at all. And now Jesus is just looking at only the sins that were already written up there. Right. So okay, now I understand what you mean. You're saying we're in a sinless period of time, right? From 1844 till now, anything we do, it's all sinless, right? Oh no, Chris, that's not what we mean. I know, because you're going frustrated, because you're like, oh, it doesn't make sense, but I want to make it make sense, but I can't, and I'm so mad, because it means I'm worshiping a false prophet and a false religion, and that I'm breaking Sabbath. That's right, you are doing that. You're breaking 7 commandments every single week, including the Sabbath. And I'm angry, and I want to see you guys make sense of this for me. And I'm sorry I didn't really read much of the comments. I leave the live chats going because I want you all, in case someone does want to I guess attack me, go over what I say, you at least have it in the comment sections. People can read it. I don't ever censor nothing, right? But I will, and I don't know why you can't make a 15-minute video just explaining sola scriptura. I mean, prima scriptura. Why you can't make a video explaining that little thing, man? Like that, it's not that hard, man. I do want to try to find one thing. Oh, by the way, I did get this mail. Let me just finish. I'll do this one too, because I got this piece of mail that was pretty interesting. At least it's interesting to me. We'll make sure we put this on here. Hey, Zimri, I'll be done in just a minute, man. I'm not going to let this go on too much longer. Okay. Oops. I did not want. Why wouldn't it bring that up? Oh, man. There we go. Like I said, my cursor is just a little funky today. But see, this was left on a Glenn Beck video years ago, and someone sent this to me. They noticed this, but because you guys like to work with the Jesuits. Says my wife's college had a huge section of their graduation ceremony dedicated to the Juneteenth agenda. It's a private Seventh-day Adventist college that tried to deny my wife the ability to finish her education because she will not be vaccinated. How's that for diversity, equity, and inclusion? And see, we know, again, we know the Vatican has had a 200-year history of this. So you guys, you need to figure out whose side you're really on or whose side you really want to be on, because all I can see is this group taking damning people's souls to hell by getting them to break all 7 commandments weekly by following a false prophet. I think that's a really huge issue, right? And then see, I've done videos about this in the past too, right? Where you had the Seventh-day Adventist Church promoting this on the Sabbath, this whole thing. We can see the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Look, Shiloh Seventh-day Adventist Church is hosting a that word, that warp speed Trump word right here, hosting a education event on Saturday. Oh, what's Saturday? Sabbath. That will feature a panel of physicians from the Advent Healthcare. See, they're all promoting it, right? And we're going right along. It's like right with the Pope, right? Oh, punishments and rewards. Oh, remember when that lady, what did she say? Think about this. Papal vaccine campaigns offered punishments 200 years ago. And they're bragging about it in this article. They're bragging about being the first to do this, right? Punishments. The Pope does punishments. Oh, the Seventh-day Adventist College does punishments too, because you're not going to get to finish your education if you don't do this thing. Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Oh, just like your mommy, right? Your mommy, the Catholic Church. Just like your mother, whore, right? Mommy, what should I do? Oh, go tell him to get vaccinated too. Okay, mommy, I will. Okay, see, go do it. Good little Adventist children. Go do it. Okay, mommy, we'll do it. Guys are disgraceful, man. And coming up here and can't even. Oh man, it it doesn't take much thinking. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is the last piece I want to finish with. This is one of my favorite things I wrote, but I need to change it to 7 commandments. So, see, I said I need to change this to 6 commandments. Seventh-day Adventists break every Sabbath observance. The 4th commandment is to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, which involves resting and dedicating this day to spiritual matters. But promoting falsehoods on this day is seen as a violation of this commandment. So, bearing false witness, the 9th commandment prohibits bearing false witness against your neighbor. If promoting a false prophet involves spreading lies or deceit, it could be considered a form of bearing false witness. Here we're breaking 2 commandments with adultery. The 1st and 2nd commandments warn against having other gods and making idols. If the promotion of a false prophet leads others to follow someone other than the true God, then it could be seen as a form of adultery. Why is this? Well, see, if God did not speak these words that Ellen White's speaking, but you're saying at your church that your church follows the same God as Ellen White, well, you're not following the real God because God didn't speak those words. So now you're following her God because you say that at your church you follow the same God she follows. Uh-oh. Now you're no longer even following that God. So yes, you are breaking 2 commandments right here. Taking God's name in vain, because when you're a prophet prophesying under the name of God, you're taking his name in vain. Plus, when you promote the false prophet, you're promoting this name taking in vain, right? So the third commandment prohibits taking the Lord's name in vain. If someone claims the authority of God or speaks falsely in his name, it could be considered taking his name in vain. Well, we know she definitely did that. Stealing, receiving money through the fraud of promoting a false prophet could be considered a form of theft, as it involves deception to obtain financial gain. This act could be seen as violating the commandment against stealing, which prohibits taking something that does not rightfully belong to you through deceit or fraud. In the religious context, this type of fraud is particularly serious because it exploits individuals' faith and trust. Stealing. So when you steal, you're basically saying, oh, this is a true prophet and that she really does represent God. And this God that she promotes is the true God. And you get these people to believe it, and they believe it under this deception. Well, if they're believing it under this deception, then you are stealing to them, because that's just like, you're promoting an item that has a car that does something and it doesn't do that, and someone buys that car. Well, that you committed fraud, right? Because you said, oh, this car I'm going to sell you can do all these things, and it doesn't do all those things. You just stole money. That's why fraud and false advertisement seems like such a big deal, right? And then number 7, honoring your mother and father. I would argue that even if your parents pat you on the back for promoting this false prophet, that's still not really honoring them, because to be honest, everyone else is going to look at your parents poorly for what their children do. They're going to be like, oh, okay, so you're raising this cancer into society, right? And so they look at that and they're like, okay, so that's kind of dishonoring your mother and father, because that's causing other people to look down on your parents, because they're like, how could you raise such a person that goes and promotes deceit? So I would say you break 7 commandments every single Sabbath, at least. Not to mention, I mean, some of you, I don't know. It's like I walked into a Seventh-day Adventist church. Here's a crazy thing. I keep forgetting to tell people this. The craziest thing was years ago, I decided to go to a Seventh-day Adventist church because I read Walter Martin's book, Kingdom of the Cults. And he had, like, on the last chapter of it, he's got this part called Seventh-day Adventist. And I'm like, okay, are they a cult? And he kind of made it sound like they're borderline. But what I didn't understand at the time was, and Walter Martin later did a video where he explained they lied to him and they presented themselves one way to him. But then when he talked to other people, he found out that they're actually very cultish. So, and I'm not going to get into all the details, just keep this short. But so when I go to their church, I'm like, okay, I'm a little leery, but I'll give it a chance, right? And one of the things I noticed was, I'm talking to this person, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I voted for Obama." Stuck to the rest of the church. "Oh yeah, we vote Democrat." I live in Indiana, one of the most conservative, most Republican states there is in America. I was in I was in a conservative area. These people are the people that are way out left, right? And here they go. And like, so when I'm looking for Democrats, I'm not thinking I'm going to go to some church that's supposed to be real conservative, talking about the Catholic Church. And then almost the entire church votes Democrat. Wait a minute. Abortion, open borders. They promote putting restrictions on freedom of speech. Um, and all these other things. And it's like, why would you ever vote the Democrat Party when in 1841 they made deals with the Catholic Church to take the Bible out of public schools? And I'm bringing all this up to them, and they're just kind of seeming a little dumbfounded to me. And then it's like, but we're going to do this anyway. And I'm like, okay, all right, Simri, give me just 5 more minutes. All right. um, but anyway, so I'm like, how do you guys just go and support all these it doesn't even make sense that you're going to vote for the Democrat Party, because they clearly want an open border, right? So they clearly, and we know, so to the south of the border is 90% Catholic, and they want all this immigration. And you would think that, okay, are you guys capable of putting 2 and 2 together? And obviously, maybe they really struggle, and that's why they think this woman's a true prophet. And maybe that's why they look at Daniel 8 and think that makes sense to them, the way she interprets it. When these people can't even figure out that the Democrats keeping the southern border open might be a bad thing since it's letting in all these Catholics, which the Seventh-day Adventists claim they hate. But see, the thing is, I think it's just this two-faced thing that's going on where it's like I'm gonna say some things so you guys can't catch on, but we're really gonna promote this agenda. And to me, I said that years ago, and now I see more proof of that when I saw that in 2020, you're promoting the thing that Donald Trump stood for. And Donald Trump went to Jesuit Fordham University. And we see the Catholic Church going along with this and trying to do everything it can to make everybody take it. It's like, um, it's just wild to me. But see, the thing about it too is they have abortions at Seventh day Adventist hospitals. So you can add another commandment to it that they're breaking. Murder, right? So they promote murder, taking the life of an unborn, and they don't seem to have any problem with it, and they seem to just be just fine with it. And it's all because of their little doctrines about, like, I think it goes into the state of dead, soul sleep, and things relating to that. And therefore, since this infant's not born, they're not really alive, they're not really a human being, and they don't have a problem with it. And so it's like, so they're a real sick, twisted church on a lot of fronts. And by the way, Seventh Day Adventists, you know who else promotes abortion? Catholic Church, because they actually invest money into these companies that do these abortion pills and things like that. And when you look at the most pro-abortion states, let's say Maryland, New York, California, um, a couple others that are escaping my name. I'm escaping my memory. Um, but when you look at a few of these others, you can see that they're ran by almost nothing but Catholics who are Democrat, and yet this is who you vote for, and you support this. And when you say, "Oh, I'm on the same side as abortion," then I'm watching you guys promote the same things and promote this whole warp speed agenda and all this other stuff. It's like, come on now. And you guys are the Protestants, and you guys are, I mean, just because you say the word Jesuit and you guys think you can fool us? No, you guys, this looks like a fraud to me. You're going right along with it. And I would love to have one of your health experts come on one of my shows. Let me ask them some questions since they think this thing's so safe. Come on my show, please. I got plenty of questions for you. I'd love to see you. I'd make this tougher than the Daniel 8 stuff, that's for sure, because I know that this stuff's bad. I know this stuff is something different than what it really is. But I would love for one of your experts, since you guys think you know the truth and you can't possibly be doing anything wrong by going along with the Pope on this one thing. Well, actually, go with more than one thing, as I just mentioned. But yeah, I'd love to see that. Love to see that. So, so I am really sorry I never opened up the mics to anyone. I really thought I could make this even shorter, and I think I'm gonna find a way to do this even shorter. But I feel like I was very thorough in the first hour and a half and showing you how anyone can feel pretty confident if you go through Daniel 8 yourself in that similar way. You're going to come to these conclusions. You don't need all these other prophecy teachers and things like that are just pulling you all over the place with their crazy interpretations. I think it looks pretty sound that there's only one way to interpret this. And if someone's got a different way and you think it makes more sense, make that video. I'll go watch it and let me know. Just leave a comment, because I know you can't leave link, like YouTube sometimes doesn't allow people to leave links. Leave a comment in my comment section. Say, Chris, I made a video. Come to my channel and see it. Okay, I'll click it, go watch it. All right. But especially Seventh-day Adventists, you want to explain this. I want to see I want to see your explanation. You keep saying I'm wrong. I want to see your explanation. You can do like the first 15 minutes where you just give me a quick walkthrough of verses 8 through 14. And then like my video, you can just stretch it on. Okay. So, oh yeah, I bet you're saying that you did not know about probably about the abortion and them voting Democrat. I'm imagining. Yeah, yeah. Walter Martin did say that, because he said that you guys had some kind of some kind of book about the fundamentals or something that you presented to them. But then later on, you guys, I guess you guys took it back or something. Well, it depends on what you mean by conditionalist, Stefan, because I wouldn't say like the SDAs, man, because you guys have like me. I just think it's like you just put your faith in God, and then it's a matter of what does that look like, right? What does it look like to put your faith in God? And I would wonder if some people, if they're promoting a false prophet and it doesn't even bother their conscience, I wonder if they actually believe Jesus. Because I think if I actually knew Jesus, and it would be hard for me to be like, yeah, let me find ways to put words in his mouth that aren't true. Oh, it doesn't bother me when this person lies about Jesus and says Jesus told her this when he actually didn't. Yeah, I don't mind. Like that doesn't bother. I wonder about that person's conscience. And as I'm wondering about their conscience, yes, I do wonder, are they really saved? And if you want to call that conditionalism, whatever. What I think is people can make up their own Jesus and then go be friends with that Jesus they made up with in their minds. And does that Jesus that they made up in their own little mind, is that the Jesus that saves them? They can go, oh well, my homosexual Jesus that says it's okay to for men to marry other men. That Jesus is the one who died on a cross for me. Okay, let's see if that Jesus saves you. Go ahead, keep believing in him. Like well, that's what I'm saying, and I'm only using like a very dramatic, um, example right there. But it's like if your Jesus told you it's okay to murder, and you're like, oh yeah, I believe that Jesus. He was in the grave for 3 days and rose, and he's the one who gives me eternal life. See, is that Jesus really the one that saves you? Is it like, are you allowed to say those? See, I think in a better context, I'd be like, well, I'm not saying you have to know the Bible perfectly to be saved, but I don't think you like, but by believing in some weird Jesus that doesn't exist, I don't know if that Jesus saves you. Okay. So, I mean, I do think it's important to put your faith in the right Jesus. I personally don't know how someone can put their faith in the right Jesus and ever go through a period where I don't believe at all. I quit believing. I became an atheist. I became a devil worshiper. That to me, it doesn't jive. And I know there's people out there that believe that stuff. That doesn't jive with me. Now, can you have a moment where you might doubt for a minute, but you don't seriously doubt? Or maybe you were raised in a church and now you're like, but I never really looked into it. Right there, I think that's a questionable thing, whether you are or not. And that's where some people will argue, oh yeah, you're always saved because but if that's the case, then why not take all these little kids? It's like, well, see, to me, it's sort of like believing in Santa. Like you can get a little kid to believe in Santa because they're so trusting in everything you say, they don't know any better. And if you get someone to say they believe in something like that and it's like, oh yeah, Santa gives you presents and he lives in the North Pole, and someone's like, yeah, I believe that, and they don't know anybody, and they think they can trust you. I mean, is that the kind of faith that saves, or is this a faith where you actually have to know, right? Like where you actually know. Like, see, for me, whether Jesus, like, let's say I was going to be damned to hell forever. That's just the truth, right? And like, no matter what I do, I can never like, make amends with God for any reason. Let's just say like the way that one verse is interpreted, where if you sin and you know better and you sin anyway, there's left no more sacrifice for you for atonement. Let's say that actually means that if you sin after knowing what the right thing to do is, hey, you're doomed to hell. Let's just pretend it says that. I at least know Jesus so much to where I know have no other option, right? Like I wouldn't be like, well, maybe this Bible might be wrong because I'm heading to hell now. Like let's say that was at the absolute true way to be. I know Jesus so well where I know I have no other options. I believe the Bible because I know there are no other options. So if the Bible was ever proven to be true, I know I'm very confident I have zero place to go. I have no other place to go. So I mean, so to me, when I believe the Bible, it's like I'm looking at it from a point of view where I have no place else to go. I've looked at other things. I don't see. I've reasoned with it. There's no other possible place to go. So whatever this Bible says, I'm stuck with it. Whatever it says, right? And I'm to that point where I'm just trying to learn what it really says, and that's where I'm going with it. And as far as like, if someone wants to call me a conditionalist, as far as like saying, oh, you think you have to keep believing in Jesus, and it's like, well, I see all these verses that say believe and you will be saved. I never see a verse that says believe you can quit and you'll still be saved. I don't see verses like that. So if someone wants to call that conditionalism, fine, you go call that conditionalism. But don't be thinking I'm sitting here saying you have to do X, Y, and Z and do this and do that and do this and do that in order to be saved. No one's ever heard me teach that. I'm just saying that I don't see how people can think they know Jesus and then be teaching all this other garbage that some of these people be teaching, right? And that's the thing I'll throw out there for you. So if you want to call that conditionalism, that's fine. But to me, everyone's got condition except for Calvinists and Universalists, but everyone else has a condition, because that condition is you got to believe. Almost everyone would say you at least have to believe once, and then some people would be like, the quality of that belief. It's like, do I actually have to believe Jesus, or can I believe in like a different kind of Jesus and add my own rules? And can that one be saved? Some people will argue, yeah, that one can still save you, you know. Um, and then some. And then there's some people that be like, no, but if like you put your faith in the real, actual Jesus, even if it's just for a minute, even if you quit believing and go start worshiping Satan and start murdering people, you're still saved, but there's still a condition there, because it's still how long did you have to believe? What exactly did you have to believe? Some people think, hey, if you didn't believe in the Trinity and you had that 1 minute of sincere faith, that doesn't count. So see, so that when people tell me you're a conditionalist and all this other, that stuff means nothing to me. When people say, "Oh, I'm not a conditionalist," or "You're a conditional," it means nothing to me. Everyone's got conditions except for the Calvinists and Universalists. Everyone. I would argue they all got conditions. And even the Calvinists, they sound conditional to me. So it just seems like everyone's got a condition except the Universalists. So that's as far as I'll address that. I don't want this thing to go over 3 hours. So bye, everybody.